Tonight on the All Kinds Weather Forecast, we recap the debut performance of DJ Lagway as the Florida Gators recover from the Miami loss with a 45-7 win over Samford. We recap the game, we talk about Lagway's historical performance, and where the Gators got to do to beat Texas A&M. This is the All Kinds of Weather Forecast. And welcome into another episode of the All Kinds of Weather Forecast. I'm your host, Chris Yanes, alongside my co-host, Neil Schulman, here in the heart of Gator Nation. A Gator Nation still talking about that performance last night that DJ Lagway put on a historic performance for a debut for a Florida quarterback. And we will talk all about that performance, what it means for the Florida Gators. But of course, we've got to shout out our sponsors. The All Kinds of Weather Forecast is proudly sponsored by 401k Generation, the wealth management company that helps you invest today for your future tomorrow. Their team of advisors is committed to providing guidance and education for your 401k plan and its participants for a range of enrollment solutions tailored to meet the unique needs of your company's 401k plan. Whether it's saving for your child's college, investment advice, or even your retirement, 401k Generation's team of advisors makes getting to know you their top priority. Their advisors will tailor a path to assist you in navigating life's financial milestones and reaching your financial goals. 401k Generation, building stronger futures, one generation at a time. For more information, contact them at 866-998-5879 or visit their website at 401kgeneration.com. With all that taken care of, make sure also for those tuning in to this episode on YouTube to hit that subscribe button down below, like this episode, and leave a comment. Your thoughts on DJ Lagway's performance in the swamp against Samford, and if you believe he should be the starter against Texas A&M. Neil and I are going to give our thoughts later in the show on that. But we got a game to talk about. The Gators recovered. They win 45-7 over Samford. They, depending on where you got your late game line there, some lines were 37.5, some were 38. So it's either a slight cover or a push, depending on where you look. But you know what they say, good teams do cover. The Gators covered against Samford, getting this big win. The first half was a little bit of a slow start, and I think there was a lot left to be desired in that first half. The Gators probably could have put two more scores up on the board that really would have made this look like an old-fashioned beatdown of an FCS opponent. But Montrell Johnson did start the action with the first two touchdowns, a 1-yard run and a 7-yard run, respectively, in the first and the second quarter. The Gators also in the first half were able to jar a ball loose on the initial drive, forcing a fumble. And unfortunately, though, we're stuffed on 4th and 1, something the Gators certainly are going to have to get better push on the offensive line if they're going to beat those SEC opponents down the road. They then, though, continued the action in the second half. DJ Lagway is going to hit one true freshman and a redshirt freshman. The first to Tank Hawkins for 36 yards. The second to Aiden Mizell, a 41-yard rope that he threw off one foot as he was evading pressure. The Gators entering the fourth quarter led 28-7. Trace Mack tacked on a field goal to make it 31-7. And then Eugene Wilson, who Neil pointed out on Twitter, who had not got a touch in the first half, finally got a touch in the second half and went 85 yards on a quick little pitch pass right in front of the quarterback. Put one foot in the ground, and it was good night from there. And then Aiden Warner, a walk-on quarterback, gets the opportunity for some garbage time. And he made the most of it, scoring that 9-yard touchdown run to make it 45-7. And helping me get nicknamed Christodamus for the 45-7 prediction of the game. I'm going to shout that out. I got to. We all were pretty close on the margin and on the score number, where I think we all thought the 40s, Samford somewhere between 3 and 14 points. So we're right there, but you know, I hit it right on the head. Should have played the lottery last night, Neil, but that's okay. Overall, though, the Gators had an impressive performance. DJ Lagway, 18 of 25, 456 yards, 3 touchdowns, no interceptions. Montrell Johnson added 67 yards on the ground. Jaden Baugh added 34 on the ground, had a pretty good performance for the true freshman. And receiving, Eugene Wilson. Slow start, but made the most of it later on. 6 catches, 141 yards, and a touchdown. The 85-yard touchdown run where most of those yards came from. Elijah Badger, several deep balls in this game. 3 catches for 123. He has already now solidified himself as the starter 2 games in. And the rest of it was kind of by committee. Aiden Mizell, we mentioned him, the big 41-yard touchdown catch. Tank Hawkins, the 36-yard touchdown catch. The tight ends combined for nearly 60 yards and 4 catches apiece. But Neil, overall, Gators, good performance on offense. Overall a good performance on defense as well. But the story of the night is DJ Lagway.
It can't not be. There's nowhere else you can possibly look. I mean, maybe you can say, if you want to nitpick, you can make a story of the offensive and defensive lines maybe not dominating by as much as you may have hoped against a team like Samford, or maybe you can aim more of the ink at the freshman wide receivers with a headline such as, yeah, DJ Lagway shined, but how about those freshman receivers? But, I mean, it's got to be Lagway. Lagway deserves the headlines. He was a 5-star signee for a reason. Florida put a lot of effort into recruiting him, and the NIL game was really centered on him for a reason. We saw that reason last night, or we saw those reasons last night, plural. He did a lot of different things that were very impressive. Chris, you can let me know when you want me to talk specifically about the coaching and the play calling and just the overall game callings. I think that's a separate discussion to have, but I think if we're just going to start the show off and talk about the number one takeaway, it's got to be DJ Lagway.
Absolutely. We'll get into that here in short order, but yes, we want to cover DJ in another segment later in this episode. But yes, DJ Lagway stole the show. And if you look on Twitter, there were several former quarterbacks shouting him out, several former Heisman winners. You had RG3 basically saying he cemented himself as potentially the starter at Florida. It's hard to keep him off the field. Even if you got praise from a guy that doesn't give a lot of praise to the Florida Gators very often, and Danny Cannell. So, DJ Lagway caught the attention of the nation last night, even though we played a far inferior opponent. And we'll talk about this later as well, but yes, this was Samford. But it was different because he made throws and plays in this game that no matter who the opponent is, are very difficult to make, and he made them in this game. So we'll talk about that later, but yes, Neil, let's talk about the coaching. Let's talk about the play calling. That was certainly, you and I sat next to each other during this game, and we were chatting and throughout it, and I do believe the play calling set us back in the first half and at some points in the game where we could have scored more points had there been some better feel for the game.
All right, here we go. Look, I know I'm the guy that gets a bad rap for being too negative. I know that 60 to 70% of the fan base is probably trying to soak up every last moment from according to Vegas, one of the few wins that Florida's probably going to get this year. The play calling was awful. Don't be fooled by the raw numbers of 45-7 or the cover in Vegas. That was a horribly called game, especially in the first half. And let's start with the first drive of the game, which, keep in mind, is the only drive you actually script during the week. So you had 6 days to draft how this drive was going to go. And this is what you do, which, by the way, after a fumble, you get the ball in plus territory. This is what you do with 6 days to script this. First play, run to Montrell Johnson. Gains nothing. Second play, run to Montrell Johnson, which, okay, he breaks it. Nice spin move. Gets 16. Fine. Third play of the drive. It's a passing play. Well, it's supposed to be a passing play. Lagway has nothing, takes off, gets 1. 2nd and 9. Montrell Johnson gets another handoff. That gets 2. It's 3rd and 7. DJ Lagway throws a 5-yard hitch. I will say, in the defense of the coaching on this particular play, as of this recording, I don't have the all-22 yet. I don't know where that ball was supposed to go. I don't know if Hayden Hansen didn't run the route far enough. I don't know if that was a check down route. I don't know if Lagway went through his progressions and that's where he ultimately settled on. So I'm not assigning blame for that. But point being, Hansen falls forward for another yard. It's a 6-yard gain. Now it's 4th and 1. And instead of utilizing your 6'3", 235-pound QB on a sneak or a Tebow type power draw, or even faking it, having him bootleg or do a little RPO, just something to utilize those talents, you run Wildcat with Trayon Webb. It gets nothing. So you force a fumble on plus side of the field, 1st and 10 at the Samford 43, and you have nothing to show for it, getting stuffed on a 4th and 1 Wildcat play where your best athlete doesn't even, or really your two best athletes, neither of which touch the ball on that play, in Trey Wilson or DJ Lagway. That would not be something worthy of praise, that drive, if it was Alabama. The fact that you got 1 first down. The fact that it was Samford is frightening. But, well, people are going to say Neil's being negative. He's nitpicking on 1 drive. Okay, fine. Let's look big picture here. Why did DJ Lagway only attempt 6 passes on Florida's first 5 drives of the game? Now, some of that, to be completely fair, is because DJ Lagway picked up huge chunks of terrain with some bombs, which limits the number of plays you can run when you eat up so much ground at once. But still, 5 drives, and he dropped back to pass 6 times? Why did Trey Wilson, who, if DJ Lagway's not your best athlete, Trey Wilson is, why did Trey Wilson touch the ball a grand total of 0 times in the entire first half? Again, I will insert the caveat a second time. If Lagway is hitting these dime pieces to Mizell and Hawkins and Badger, you can't get too mad. But still, why is Montrell Johnson touching the ball on 2 of every 3 sets of downs, or 2 of every 3 plays on each set of downs, and Wilson gets fed 0 times in an entire half? And then comes the worst of all. Might I ask, why are we content to just kill the clock and go to halftime with a 14-0 lead? First with 4 minutes to go, starting with a run to Johnson that goes nowhere, and then we burn the full 40 seconds off the play clock in between what turned out to be 2 DJ Lagway scrambles that gained a total of 3 yards before a punt. Florida's defense, to their credit, then forces another punt. We get the ball back with a minute to go, and this is what we do on that drive. With 1 minute to go exactly, a run to Johnson, which, to his credit, gets 14 yards. Still, it's a bad play call because Florida's out of timeouts to start the drive. You don't assume that a running play like that's going to get 14 yards, so that's a terrible play call that you got bailed out of. But, okay, fine, 14 yards. Fast forward a few plays later. It's 3rd and 1 with 23 seconds to go on Florida's own 44. Lagway then hands it off to Johnson again, who gets 2 more yards and a first down. So, clock stops for a second, but you're out of timeout, so you can't stop it for very long. So the clock keeps ticking and ticking and ticking. And now at this point, you're at your own 46. You're 54 yards away from the end zone with 17 seconds left. Your touchdown is gone. That ship has sailed. So now, Chris and I, you and I were talking, all right, that's not good, but let's at least kick a field goal out of that. Let's at least get something. So what do? Quick pass to Boardingham to the sideline for about 6. Now there's 12 seconds left. You're 48 yards away from the end zone. That's a 65-yard field goal. That's not viable, so you got to get closer. At most, you have 2 more plays to do so. 2 pass plays, nobody's open. They're both very badly designed plays. On one of them, maybe it looks like a mesh route. Maybe you have Chimere DK downfield, but it was going to be a tough throw. The pocket was collapsing, and there was a defender in the area, and lofting a rainbow might have killed the rest of the clock there. So that one particularly isn't on the coaches. But again, no urgency. With a 14-0 lead, you cannot be content to go to halftime with a 14-0 score against a team like this. We're Florida. We put 50 burgers on these types of teams. We 60-piece Charleston Southern and Florida International in the same year in 2009. We dropped 63 on Idaho in 2018. We hung 70 on the Citadel in 2008. In fact, matter of fact, we put 70 on this very team that we just played 3 years ago. We put 82 on Central Michigan in 1997. That is the standard. We are the Florida Gators. We do not settle for 14-0 scores at halftime against overmatched payday opponents. Instead, we blow them to kingdom come until we feel like we've made our point. And then at that point, if their backups beat our backups on a few reps and they eat into the final margin a little bit, fine, so be it. We'll live with that. I know this is Samford. I know that those who find me to be overly critical or nitpicky will probably do it again here. But, to those, I will say the facts matter, not just the facts that fit my narrative. So I will point out, yes, Florida's offense did pick up the pace a little bit. They called more deep passing plays in the second half. We did score 31 points. We did finish with 45. I do think the play calling opened up a bit and got more aggressive. I think we gave Lagway more chances to show what he could do. I'm sorry. I'm simply not that impressed with a 14-0 halftime score against a team that lost by 2 scores to the University of West Georgia last week. And yes, Jaden Ball's fumble did not help matters. And yes, the offensive line wasn't as dominant as you would have hoped. The bulk of the blame here lies in the play calling. And now we're out of cupcakes. So you don't get the benefit of the doubt anymore because you blow a team away, because no such opponents exist anywhere else on the schedule. So it's big boy time now. Let's see what we've got.
Yeah, no, it is. And regardless, I mean, to your point about the fumble and then the downs, the bad play calling led to the fact that we didn't get that 4th down conversion to start the game after the fumble that could have led to 7. The fumble, obviously, by Bob, that's on him. He fumbled the ball. We had a nice drive at that point. That was a 4-play, 72-yard drive at that time. We had only queued up 91 seconds of clock. So that was headed for another touchdown. And so to be fair, if it weren't for that, we would have put up 2 more touchdowns. But that still doesn't negate the fact that you had a bad play call that didn't help us get the 4th and 1. And then we had punt and then downs on our last 2 drives of the first half, like you mentioned. And all of those are credited to play calling. So I agree. The play calling has to open up faster. And, that was the one thing that we could at least hang your hat on with Billy Napier the last 2 seasons, was that the man could just script a heck of a first drive. And so far, 2 games in, he scripted terrible drives. Terrible drives the first 2 games of the season that haven't led to any points. That's got to change against Texas A&M next weekend if we're going to have a chance to win. We're in the SEC schedule now, officially. We didn't get a cupcake non-conference warm-up of 2 weeks like we have historically. We got Miami, then we got the Samford team, and now it's big boy time, like you said. So the play calling has to get better, and I think part of the problem is going to be, now, where do you go with the quarterback position? Because I think that actually does have an effect on the play calling, because DJ Lagway certainly can do things with the offense that Graham Mertz cannot. And that's not being disrespectful to Graham Mertz. That's just reality of the athlete that DJ Lagway is and the athlete of the quarterback that Graham Mertz is. And, before anybody says, we're dogging Mertz. No, there are things that Graham Mertz does that are better than DJ Lagway. Graham Mertz is much better in the short and intermediate passing game. You look at the long balls by Lagway last night. Against better teams, he's not going to be able to hit those long balls. They're going to be better defended against better cornerbacks, better safeties, better teams that have better defensive schemes than Samford did. So the short and intermediate passing game, taking what the defense can give you, that is something that Graham Mertz currently has shown that he could do better than DJ Lagway. Now, that can change with more experience, but that's something that we're going to have to see going forward, and I think that's going to have a big determining factor on where the play calling goes from here, Neil.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, I don't know why the default with this current staff is to give them the benefit of the doubt, because they haven't earned it. So if anyone out there is thinking, oh, well, maybe they're just hiding something for Texas A&M,
they're not.
No, they're not. What data do you have? You
had to throw the kitchen sink in the first game against Miami.
Right. So, there's that. And there's also the fact that you've never shown that ability to do that at any point in his 2+ years at Florida now. Well, apparently, Billy Napier isn't the only play caller, right? It's just the staff as a whole, or whatever garbage quote he gave in the press conference, which, for the record, I just don't even listen to. I'm done with that.
I will be listening tomorrow, though, to see, because it's going to come up.
Oh, yeah. So, okay, yes. And I will say, in that context, to that degree, yes, I listened to the press conferences. I mean, I don't ever discern anything. I don't learn anything, really. It's more interesting to see his body language, or just to see if he loses his mind, which is, for him, is going to come in the sense of calling out fans in their rural Central Florida basements. He won't lose his voice by screaming. But the point is, there's no reason to trust this staff because they haven't ever shown you that they're worth trusting.
Yeah, no, they haven't. They haven't won enough games to earn that trust yet, and there's going to be some opportunities for them for the next few weeks to certainly change that narrative. We just haven't seen the evidence that narrative is going to be changed with the results on the field. So we'll have to see what happens over the next couple of weeks. But
prove me wrong, Billy. Prove me wrong. Yeah, I've said it before.
Please prove us.
I said it before. I like the guy. I like him as a person very much. I need data. I need evidence to be able to validate any real belief in this guy. So if you're going to give me new data that I don't currently have my hands on, I'm willing to change my opinion, but it's on you to give it to me in the first place.
Yep, no doubt. All right, so let's move on to evaluating kind of offense and defense, and we'll lead the discussion with Neil. The young guys and the newcomers were the stars of the show in this game. Obviously, we talked about Lagway. We mentioned Elijah Badger. We mentioned Aiden Mizell, a redshirt freshman. But also, I mean, look at some of the other guys on the defensive side of the ball. George Gums had a great game, played fantastic from the edge position, got into the backfield numerous times, tackles for loss, sacks. Tariq Sapp had a good game himself. But it was the young guys that really stole the show in this game. Chimere Dike also forgot to mention he had a nice 44-yard catch, and he is quickly becoming a fantastic punt returner that teams are going to actually have to start accounting for. What makes him so dynamic as a punt returner is he's able to make that first, second guy miss. Because oftentimes on a punt return, you have your gunners on the left and the right side respectively, and they are making a full, fleeted sprint to the punt returner, and they're typically the guys that get there first. Now, the punt returner's job is to determine if they're going to have enough time to catch it and make them miss or fair catch it, and he just has an incredible ability to determine both. There were several times where he was able to actually evade the first and second defenders and turn it into a massive gain on the punt return. So that is an element to special teams we have not had recently. I would say Freddie Swain is probably the last good punt returner that we had.
Pearsall.
And I guess I'm forgetting Kadarius Toney. Toney was very dynamic.
We've had it last couple of years, but I don't. Something about DK, you're right. It feels different. Pearsall is a very good punt returner, but DK feels like a little bit more of an upgrade, even from what Pearsall was.
Yeah, no, and it's hard to believe, but it's been great to see, and certainly something I don't think we anticipated having that from him in this offense. So he's played very well. It's been a very good addition to the team. The receiving core looks fantastic. It's deep. Now that you got guys like Tank Hawkins, Aiden Mizell, potentially Marcus Burke working their way into the rotation, it adds elements to the offense. So if Napier could come up with some better passing route concepts like you talk about, this offense could quickly become very dynamic, more so than any other offense that he's had in his tenure at Florida. So, Lagway broke a freshman record, true freshman record. Now, this is a little bit of a distinction because I actually was reading about this. He broke Chris Leak's true freshman record because Chris Leak started as a true freshman in 2003. The high mark was 269 yards in the thrilling comeback win against Kentucky, 24-21, for any of those Gator fans that remember that game. Danny Werfel was a redshirt freshman in 1993 when he passed for 459 yards. So,
or not, I think.
Was it 449? Okay, so 449 as a redshirt freshman. Lagway finished off with 456. He was 27 yards shy of breaking Tim Tebow's record in the 2010 Sugar Bowl with 482 yards. So if we had kept him in for the final drive, there is a possibility he would have made school history that night in his first performance.
Or if we open up the offense more in the first half and he throws the ball more than 6 times in his first 5 drives, maybe.
Yep. Yeah, and to be fair, like a little pop pass to Eugene Wilson right in front of him counted as an 85-yard passing touchdown. So, a lot of that was done with the feet of Eugene Wilson on that play. But, I mean, we saw the long balls, the explosive plays that we were able to get with him in this offense. And it definitely looked different, Neil. There was a lot more explosiveness. Lagway was able to get through his progressions numerous times, and that's how he was able to step up into the pocket and find first down. He converted several third downs down the field, like long third downs, plus third down and 5 and plus. Also, that long touchdown pass, like we mentioned earlier, to Mizell, the touchdown pass to Tank Hawkins, all those stepping up into the pocket and delivering something just on a rope. So the offense, I mean, look, it's different. It looked better. I know it was against Samford, but still, there's something to be said there that we would love to see maybe how this translates against better opponents over the next couple of weeks if he's given the opportunity. Now, the defensive side, Neil, I'm kind of curious what your thoughts are because I still think there were some times where we didn't get the push we needed from the defensive line. We did get back there. We got sacks. We got tackles for losses. But, I mean, obviously I expect that against an inferior. I mean, there was a 47-pound average difference between our lines of scrimmage on both sides of the ball. So we should get back there. But there still were just times where we're not getting the push we need. And Quincy Critton had plenty of time back there to actually evade tacklers, get down the field with the passing game, and convert third downs. And it's unfortunate, but that is going to rear its ugly head versus SEC opponents. They're going to exploit that. I don't know if the defense necessarily put anything on tape that offensive coordinators that we're going to be facing over the next few weeks are going to be concerned about.
Yeah, I mean, I used my opening salvo on this show to just rip the coaching staff. So I'll start off this segment with something a little more positive. How about Jamarcus Weston? What a super that is. What is he? A sixth year?
Yeah.
A sixth-year guy who
came in the 2019 class.
And I think he was committed in 2017. Like, he was one of those long-term commits. And here he is 7 years later, after initially committing to the Gators on the other side of the ball, at really positions that aren't even really swappable. Like, you don't think if a receiver is going to translate himself to the defense side of the ball, you don't think front seven, you think secondary. How about that? That was cool. So shout out Jamarcus Weston, way to stick with it, way to show your love for the orange and blue, and you got your moment in the swamp. That was really cool. All right. Now the more sobering reality is that there were, as you mentioned, a lot of plays where Florida didn't get pressure when they had the numbers that indicated they probably should. I mean, Florida rushing 4 against a 5-man offensive line, you think, well, okay, there's 5 of them and there's 4 of you, so probably not going to win and get to the backfield too many times, except for the fact that it is Samford, and you have a massive natural talent advantage. If you're rushing 4 against Alabama or Georgia or Texas, okay, there's a good chance that you're probably not going to get pressure on too many plays. But when you have the athletic advantage like that across the trenches and you're only getting pressure sometimes, it doesn't. And now look, Joey Slackman wasn't 100%, but that's not an excuse. That alone does not translate or should not translate to a defensive line that only gets pressure sometimes on a team like.
And he didn't get pressure last week when he played. So
right. But I mean, again, we're gonna find out. Like I said earlier, Texas A&M comes next week. I'm gonna keep saying this over and over again on this show, but Texas A&M comes next week. So you think I'm being too negative? You think I'm being too pessimistic? Okay, all right, cool. We'll see what happens next week when A&M comes to town. We'll see if this team really has gotten any better, or this is the college football equivalent of just taking a Tylenol or an Advil that masks your symptoms but doesn't really address them or get rid of them. So yeah, short answer is yes, I'm concerned.
Yeah, yes. I mean, 205 yards total offense for them, only 61 on the ground, 144 passing, but they converted 6 of 15 on third down. I mean, to me, that's way too many. I mean, yes, less than 50% is slight improvement, clap, whatever. For a defense they gave up. Yeah, exactly. Over 50% of third down conversions on a consistent basis last year. But still, I would expect a little bit better. And that could have given some more opportunities for our offense to score some more points in this game had we gotten off the field with some more 3 and outs. So, yes, you know what? Look, we'll shout out some guys. George Gums played a great game. Shout out Jamarcus Weston. He got that big play. Aaron Gates got a second fumble recovery. You know, it was a great that we forced a turnover, but I would have expected more turnovers too. Like one turnover, now only 2 in 2 games. Like, we have to become a more opportunistic defense. Like, if you go back in history of Florida football when it's great, we're leading the country in takeaways. We're not even in the stratosphere of that anymore. And we're not even doing it against far inferior opponents. We have to start becoming a more opportunistic defense, we did get a couple strip sacks that could have turned into more turnovers. So we are forgetting that. But still, you've got to get the ball. You've ultimately got to recover when you get the ball on the ground. Also, the secondary, they just aren't as aggressive as I would have hoped a Florida secondary would be that could get some interceptions. And part of why we're not getting as many interceptions is because we're not getting back to the quarterback consistently enough to force a pressure situation where they make an errant throw, similar to last year when we did against Joe Milton. Desmond Watson gets back there, impacts the pass, and it's like a punt return essentially for Devin Moore. So we'll see what happens next week. Florida's faced 2 dual threat quarterbacks to start the season. Connor Wegman is not a dual threat quarterback. So I'm looking for this defense to get back there and see if they can actually get some pressure on a quarterback who's not as mobile. That, to me, is something early on that I'm looking for this defense to take a step forward against Texas A&M. But they're going to place other dual threat quarterbacks later in the season. KJ Jefferson's coming back to the Swamp again in a couple of weeks with UCF, dual threat quarterback. I don't know if anybody's been paying attention to Nico Amaliava. Guys lighting up the scoreboard. Tennessee throttled a top 25 team this past weekend. Dual threat quarterback. You know, we're going to have to figure this out here against dual threat quarterbacks, or it is going to be ugly in some of those matchups. So we're not trying to be negative, but we are trying to at least put some reality, temper expectations whenever you do beat a team like this. You're supposed to beat a team. Yeah, exactly. We were supposed to beat Samford by 38, 40 plus points. We did it, fine. But now you open SEC play. You've got to put on a performance that's going to give us some semblance of confidence heading into the last couple of games here, or into the SEC schedule, before we then go to. I mean, the way I look at it, Neil, and we'll move to our next segment. We'll highlight Lagway next. But you've got A&M this weekend at home. You're a 3.5 point dog at home, so that's, you know, it's there for the taking. 59% chance, according to ESPN FBI, that A&M wins this game. We'll see how the power rankings move. Dustin's going to update his this week. Look out for that. Then you got Mississippi State on the road. Mississippi State was getting blown out through 3 to 4 quarters of play. They did make it close. They scored 20 unanswered to make it a 1-score game at the end. But still, that is a team where Florida should have a good chance to win that game. And then UCF at home, another team you're more talented in, should beat. So what I'm saying there is there's an opportunity, if you beat A&M this weekend, to go into that Tennessee game 4-1. Anything less than that, and I mean, I think we're talking, it's curtains very early on in the season for Napier, and you know, I don't think we really have the confidence that we're going to be able to do it, but a win over A&M could change that. It could change some of the trajectory of the season, because I think a lot of people right now, if you poll the Gator Nation, aren't favoring the Gators to win on Saturday.
I mean, you got to win your next 3 games. There's no two ways about it. You can't lose to either A&M or Mississippi State or Central Florida. There's no way you can lose any of those 3. And like I said at the start of the season, realistically survive. In theory, sure, you could lose one of the next 3 and then run off 7 wins in a row, which would include multiple massive upsets. But that's hypothetically. We're talking in the world of reality. Florida's not going to go to Jacksonville and beat Georgia based on anything I've seen. They're not going to go to Austin, Texas and pick off the Longhorns. There's no chance of that given anything we've seen. I don't think Florida has a good chance to beat Tennessee given what we've seen from them the first couple weeks of the season. So again, if we're talking in the land of reality, you've got to win your next 3 for there to be a viable, realistic chance for Napier to survive.
Yep, indeed. All right, Neil, I think it's time to talk about Lagway and what this means for the coaching staff and the decision that they're going to have to make. We already talked about it. DJ Lagway, a historic night, broke the true freshman record with 456 yards. He was 7 yards shy of breaking a single game passing record. He looked great. And it's not that, you know, yes, we played Samford, but you look at the throws that he was able to make, with the accuracy that he has. He forces defenses to cover the field differently than they would if Graham Mertz was on. I mentioned Graham Mertz is a better quarterback at this stage in his career at the short and intermediate game, which is important when the defense isn't going to give you the long ball. And the long ball, the percentage chance that you hit it is not high to begin with. Lagway obviously, clearly after last night, excels at that portion of his game. And that's not to say he's not going to improve in the short and intermediate game, but that's kind of where the differences are now. But because there is the threat of him to run, get out of the pocket, make plays with his feet, And he's very good right now at keeping his eyes down the field still, even when a lot of young quarterbacks, and I think of like a guy like Bo Nix, when they scramble and they have the ability to evade tacklers, they don't keep their eyes down the field at possibilities of receivers who pop open. Cam Ward did a fantastic job in week 1 of that. DJ Lagway did that last night, and that's what was able to make some of those deep balls even more impressive because he was able to do that. So, now the question remains, should the Gators start DJ Lagway against Texas A&M?
I think the answer to that question is different than will the Gators start DJ Lagway against Texas?
Well, that's not what I asked. Should they?
I know.
We'll address the second part of that next.
And I want to preface it by saying that I think that Napier is going to do the thing that the overwhelming majority of Gator Nation is screaming for him to not do, and that's take the ball away from DJ Lagway and give it to Graham Mertz. And look, I feel terrible for Mertz. I really, really do. He literally gave everything he had last season for Florida, and I say literally because he ended his season by giving everything he had, by lowering his shoulder and truck sticking 2 Missouri defenders on a scramble. So I have all the respect in the world for Graham Mertz, but DJ Lagway just took it. DJ Lagway took the job away from him. I believe at the very least you've got to start him and just see how it goes. And maybe you could have a short leash with him if he throws a really bad interception early, like he just doesn't see a sneaky spy just slipping back and throws it right to him, and it's taken back inside Florida's 20 and A&M scores, and it's 7-0 and Florida's in a hole, and maybe you don't want to see your quarterback thrown back out there in a 7-0 deficit. Maybe that's when you do go to Graham Mertz. But if we're going to be talking about something that you can rationally justify, I just don't see why you wouldn't start Lagway. He went out and showed you what he can do, and what he can do is make spectacular things happen. And frankly, that's kind of what the doctor ordered for this Florida program. No, I mean, again, you're 12-15 now after that win against Samford. Those stats I rattled off after the Miami game are mostly still in effect. He's still 9-15 against FBS teams. He's still 7-15 against Power 5 teams. You need an injection, an infusion of spectacularness. And DJ Lagway is the guy that's going to do it. Now, there is also something to be said that as a true freshman, it is possible, because he is young, because the offensive line, frankly, isn't very good, it is possible that he can also lose you the game by making mistakes because he's a true freshman. So I can understand that argument. But at this point, if you're Billy, you have nothing to lose. And frankly, it's time you start taking some risks, because after being so adverse to doing that throughout your first 2+ years at Florida, and you being in the position you're in terms of your job security right now, you better go down swinging. And by that, I mean, you better try something different. And then at least you can say, you know what, it didn't work out in Florida, but at least I exhausted all my options. At least I went down trying everything I possibly could have, instead of riding the same thing all the way to the grave.
Yeah. All right. So my monologue on this here. Billy Napier, obviously, his back is against the wall. He has to save his job. Now, the historical precedence for this is, I'm going to give you a couple of examples. And they don't always work out for the coach, and I'll give one. In 2003, Chris Leak was not the starter going into the season. It took a horrid performance by Engel Martin against Tennessee. Mind you, after Chris Leak nearly won us the Miami game in 2003. If he had not gotten hurt in that game, we'd probably hang on to win that game. But the following week, or 2 weeks later, Engel Martin is the starter against Tennessee. SEC opener. Loses the game. The following week, then, we give Chris Leak the start. He, slow start, but the Gators ultimately come back against Kentucky. The rest is history. Chris Leak, finally, senior year, gets a coach named Urban Meyer. Dan Mullen is his offensive coordinator. They win a national championship. Had Ron Zook maybe started to Chris Lake that day against Tennessee. Maybe the result's different. Maybe that season, which in 2003, if people remember, we lost a tiebreaker in the East, a 3-way tiebreaker. One of which was against Tennessee. If we had beaten Tennessee, we would have gone to the SEC championship game that year. So, and this is not me saying we're going to go to the SEC championship game if we start DJ Lagway against Texas A&M. But I am saying the sooner you can rip the Band-Aid off, Billy, rip the Band-Aid off. Because we all have, most of us are able to see what we saw in that field. And it's very obvious the kid has it. It's also really obvious that he's just made for this moment. Like the polished answers that he gave post-game about why he loves to be a Gator. He's a Gator through and through. He even defended his head coach, who, right now, he's got to have any defender he can have. It's time to just rip the Band-Aid off and let's start looking and building to the future. We talked about it at the beginning of the show when we were highlighting the game. Look at all of the youngsters that are making plays for this team right now. They're all Billy Napier recruits, guys that he's brought into the fold through the transfer portal. Lean into that. Like, I understand you did bring Graham Mertz through the transfer portal. Graham Mertz literally laid his body on the line last year for this team. It is not his fault that we had a losing record last year. We have talked about that ad nauseum. It is because we had the worst defense since the 1940s playing for us. If we had an average defense last year, Graham Mertz is probably an 8-4 quarterback in 2023. But that's not what happened. And unfortunately, Mertz is the quarterback who, he may not go win you the game, he's not going to lose you the game. DJ Lagway is the player that can go win you the game when you need him to do it. And he may be a boomer bust at times as a freshman. Chris Leak certainly had his performances where he was a bust in his freshman year. Everybody remembers the 4-interception performance against Ole Miss. Eli Manning comes in the swamp, wins on a late touchdown run. He took his lumps, but ultimately the team was better for it because he was able to go win us games that season due to the fact that we made that move. Look what happens with Cam Newton, an Auburn team in 2010 who nobody saw coming as a national champion, literally puts the team on his back. I mean, that team was not very talented. The coach ultimately was fired several years later after Cam Newton departed the program. But because they had him on his team, he was able to will them to victory. Dabo Swinney's had to make this decision several times. The switch from Kelly Bryant to Trevor Lawrence ultimately led to a national championship. He made the switch away from DJU and went to Cade Kublik, which yielded some better results, not a championship result, but still, Cade won them more games than probably DJU would have. And clearly we've seen the talent that DJU is now that he's at Florida State. So all this to say, Billy, if you want any shot to make it here at the University of Florida, which we have said before we want you to, we just don't believe you're going to now, this is your ace in the hole. This is it. This is your moment. Make the decision tomorrow. Go into that press conference and say, we appreciate everything that Graham's doing. He's still a part of this team. He still be a massive part of this offense. But right now, DJ Lagway gives the Florida Gators the best chance to win. That's why he's starting against Texas A&M. I don't think he'll do that, but he should do that. And I honestly think, Neil, we're going to get to a point where he's probably going to have to be forced to do that, but it's going to be too late.
Yep, and it goes back to, a couple of comparisons I'd make. Number one, the Kelly Bryant and Trevor Lawrence comparison you just made. Kelly Bryant didn't do anything terrible. It was just that Trevor Lawrence...
They went to a playoff game with Kelly.
Right. It's just that Trevor Lawrence came in and took it. Lawrence took the job. It wasn't that Kelly Bryant lost it. Trevor just won it. And that's what I think is happening here. Graham Mertz didn't intentionally get injured. He didn't make any specifically awful moves against Miami. He didn't look good, but other than the one interception, which, he threw late down.
It was by far
it was his worst performance, but I'm saying it wasn't like there is a whole body of work that justifies making the switch. You can't generally justify making the switch like that based on one bad game after the year he had in 2023. The body of work to justify the switch isn't there. But it's just that DJ Lagway, like you said, Graham Mertz is the guy that won't lose you the games, but he's also not the guy that's going to give you the better chance to win games in most cases, because DJ Lagway has the higher ceiling and granted also has the lower floor, but you're in a position now where you don't have a choice. If you want to make it to Florida, you are looking to do anything possible to give yourself the highest ceiling that you can possibly attain, because right now, the ceiling that you've shown capable of reaching is 6-6, because that's the best record you've ever had at Florida. You've never had a winning season. And that's because you've gone down on your own sword with what you wanted to do. It's taken a very, very different form than Dan Mullen, but essentially it's the same stubbornness. It's the same genre of stubbornness.
And I'll leave it, yeah. And you, to your point, Dan Mullen, if Dan Mullen had just ripped the Band-Aid off and started Anthony Richardson a few games sooner before the Georgia game, the eventual national champion that season, he probably remains the head coach at Florida. Like, I mean, that isn't even like an exaggeration.
For another year,
probably,
at least.
And who knows what would have happened with him another year, an all offseason with Dan Mullen in the fold. I don't know if Dan Mullen would have ultimately just finally decided to start recruiting during recruiting season. I have my doubts, but I think it would have saved his job. And let's think about this for a second. If he made the switch and Lagway is able to ring off 6-6, 7-5 record, then he has all of the argument in the world to keep his job, because that is the record that he's already exceeded the Vegas total. He's exceeded probably the total that people believe he's capable of hitting now. If he gets 7-5, it's his best record ever since he's been at Florida. Still not good enough, but best, and is showing a sign of improvement. And he would have done it with a freshman quarterback who he recruited and can make the argument that is his future. So all the signs point to he's got to make this move now. And if he doesn't, and he loses Saturday to Texas A&M, he has only himself to blame.
And I'll put it this way too. I'm going to be using this phrase in one of two fashions. It's up to Billy Napier to decide which fashion I choose to use it in. What must be done, or what should be done eventually? Chris, can you finish it?
Must be done now.
Correct. So either I'm going to...
Jeremy Foley said that, by the way.
Yep, Jeremy Foley, Scott Strickland's predecessor, who, hey, did some great things for Florida before things kind of turned the wrong way. But essentially, either you are going to use that as your justification to make the move to DJ Lagway, or the boosters, i.e. the fans like me, except with 10,000 times more money than me, are going to use that same line of justification to get you the holy hell out of Alachua County. It is up to you to decide how that phrase gets used. But this is the last time that you're going to have free will. So do with it what you want.
It's going to be an interesting 24 hours because we're recording this on Sunday night. The show will drop tomorrow morning. Billy Napier's press conference is late tomorrow morning, early tomorrow afternoon. And we will probably find out his decision. Now, he could just leave it open and say, we're not sure, we're going to evaluate, and kind of leave A&M on the lurch until they drop the depth chart. What would be the ultimate troll is if they put an or at the top of the depth chart. I actually would slightly respect it just for the gamesmanship.
I'd be hilarious.
You know, I don't think he's savvy enough to do it, quite frankly. But
it's a nice thought, though.
Yeah. Wishful thinking. A lot of wishful thinking these days here in Gator Nation. Listen, Billy, we're imploring you, man. We like you as a person. We would love, by miracle, a grace of God, to not have to pay a $25 million buyout and save you. But this is your last move, in my opinion, to doing it. So, and look, if Graham Mertz starts Saturday and wins us the game, then clearly you press forward with Graham Mertz as the starter. Bearing in mind, though, you have a freshman that is highly capable of running the offense and raising your ceiling as a football team. And I just do not think this issue is going to go away, regardless if Florida upsets Texas A&M on Saturday or not.
It shouldn't. And just how crazy is that to think, as Florida, as the home team, needing an upset to beat Texas A&M, which lost to Notre Dame, which lost to Northern Illinois. How insane of a statement is that that Florida is an underdog, that it would be an upset for Florida to protect its home turf against an A&M team that lost to Notre Dame, that lost to NIU.
Curious if that line moves at all if Lagway's named the starter.
It already has moved. It was 4.5. It's now 3.5.
Oh, so it did drop. Okay.
It did drop. It opened at 4.5.
So it did drop a point. We'll see. I think it honestly would get tighter. I'd be close to a pick 'em if Lagway's the starter. And at that point, to be honest, I might even pick the Gators to win Saturday if he starts Lagway, because I think it might be just a little bit of hopium and confidence, but I saw what I saw Saturday, and I think he's a lot more capable of leading us there and winning that game. And last thing, this is the last thing I'll say before we get to the final verdict, because I don't want to go too long on this, but if your quarterback is playing exceptionally well, and then he by virtue becomes the leader of your team, that alpha in the locker room, the defense is going to respond in kind too, because they know who they're playing for. And it's not to say that like we're doing that for Mertz.
And they love Mertz, by the way.
They do love him. But a lot of young guys on that team, they're playing on the defensive side of the ball, have come in with Lagway, and that's their guy. So if that's their guy, they're going to defend that guy on the defensive side of the ball and try all they can to keep it where they give him every opportunity to go win the game when he has it in his hands.
And here's the other thing I'll say too, and this is really wishful thinking, but again, we're talking about expanding the ceiling. We're talking about opening up possibilities for ourselves. Let's just, and this is purely hypothetical and theoretical and outright dreamland, but just bear with me. Just think of this as a thought experiment. Let's just say, for argument's sake, that DJ Lagway comes in as the starter, exceeds all the expectations, and miraculously, and that's what it would be a miracle, but miraculously, because of the heroics of DJ Lagway, Florida pulls an 8-4, even a 9-3 season out of absolutely nowhere. Let's also say that Ohio State turns the wrong way. I'm not going to curse. We're not going to rate this E for explicit. Let's say Ohio State season goes very, very badly. Well, DJ Lagway was very good friends with Jeremiah Smith. Let's say he's unhappy with his playing time. Let's say he's unhappy with Ryan Day. For whatever reason, that relationship turns south. He hits the portal. Where is his first look going to be? Probably going to be to Gainesville, where he reunites with DJ Lagway. You open the door to things like that happening, whereas they are shut, they are sealed with coal. If you don't even give yourself the chance for that.
Because the guys like that would have seen Lagway play for a year and know that he truly has it. And it could have a domino effect down the line. And it's like Brandon Spike said back in the day when he was deciding on a school, he came to Florida literally because Tim Tebow committed to Florida. Percy Arvin came to Florida because Tim Tebow came to Florida. Guys like that attract just tremendous athletes to your school. And if you're right, if Lagway gets a full season essentially here to put something spectacular on tape, the portal opens up next season, Florida has a decent record in the year, it really could snowball into some massive momentum for Napier in the program, and we get to avoid all the financial fallout of that. So, look, all this to say, Billy, this is your chance. Start Lagway. Let's move forward. Let's move into the future as we talked about previewing the Samford game.
Let's do it.
All right. So, final verdict. Let's grade it out, Neil. Offense, defense, special teams, and coaching.
Offense has to have some points taken off just because of the ball fumble. You got to, as you say, run the ball. Well, how about protect the ball? Let's not turn the ball over in the red zone. But overall, yeah, the first half was kind of sloppy, but you got to give it a good grade. I will say that it was a B with the caveat that you're giving a rocket scientist a fourth grade spelling test. Like, good. You should do really well on it. You're 22 years old spelling at a 9-year-old level. Good for you. But again, like we said last night or Saturday night in the instant recap, all you can do is play the opponent in front of you. Put the ball down. You go. You put on tape what you can put on tape. That's what Florida did. B. Defense is going to get I'm debating B- or C+ here again because of the opponent. I really didn't like a lot what I saw in the trenches, but Florida also didn't give up points aside from the one drive. Quincy Crittenden made a few more plays than I would have liked to have seen, but it's certainly a passing grade, even with the fact that, yes, Florida is so much more talented than Samford and should not be losing any reps really at line of scrimmage. But again, passing grade, they did what they were supposed to do. I'll give them a B- because they did keep Samford off the board in the first half when the game was actually very close for a lot longer than it should have been. So give them a B- there. Special teams, I didn't see any terrible miscues on special teams for the second week in a row. So I'll give them another B. I'll give them another B because
not even an A. You're saying there's nothing wrong on tape. What's going on?
Nothing wrong on tape, but they also didn't do anything spectacular on tape. They didn't block a punt. They didn't take a punt back to the house. They didn't. They didn't change the game like Billy Napier claims that unit is supposed to do. So that's what I reserve my A's for. They were good. They did fine, but nothing spectacular. DK didn't take a punt back to the house or anything like that. Smack didn't hit like a 60-yarder. So I'll give them another B. They were fine. No complaints. Coaching, I'll pass them with a D, but again, that play calling is so frightening, man. I don't know how that's going to translate if that's how you're going to call the game against a Texas A&M, because you assume that Lagway isn't going to hit those bombs for 50-plus yard gains, and if you're only going to let him drop back and throw the ball only a handful of times, and you don't let him do what he does so well, especially, by the way, we didn't even talk about this, the offensive line rotating guys in and out like they did.
Yeah.
That's
got to stop. They got to figure their rotation out.
If you don't have a solid offensive line, forget that. Let's take it back even more than that. If you don't have a combination of 5 guys that you can trust, you're going to have your QB running for his life, regardless of what the play call is, if it's any kind of pass. So I don't even know if I take that off the play calling or I take that off the Monday to Friday coaching. But regardless, that's on the coaching staff that you don't have a group of 5 that you can trust there. So I'll give it a D because they won the game and they didn't. It wasn't like it was a last-second field goal that beat Samford, but a lot to be desired in the play calling category for sure.
That's a good point on the off. Sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead. Go ahead. You can.
Oh no, you give your overall.
Oh yeah, overall. Overall, it's a C+. You did what you're supposed to do. It's a passing grade. It's a fairly comfortable passing grade. It's nothing spectacular. You don't call mom and say, "Hey, mom, I got a C+," but you passed. You passed the test. And fans for doing that this year for home games. The fans did a great job.
Shout out to
the level. And we didn't even talk about the parking disaster that was on Saturday. That's a whole different conversation we'll have to have at some point. But given all the obstacles put in their place, the Miami game being as terrible as it was, the parking situation, I thought the fans showed up and showed out. So I'll give them an A. They get an A for me.
Yeah, definitely. I guess I'll work in reverse here. The fans 2 weeks in a row really just showed up, showed out. I'm at Gator Walk every week on one of the tailgate tents there, and I took a picture, and you can find it on my Twitter at Mr. Crispitz. It looked the same. I mean, between Miami and Samford, the Gator fans showed up in mass it definitely was subdued an hour before Gator Walk, but it filled in for Gator Walk, and the fans were lively. You look around the stadium last night, the only part of the stadium that wasn't filled in was the sunshine seats up top on the third deck, and a little bit over where the south end zone meets the student section. A couple of parts maybe by the recent grad spots on the other end of that, but it was full. I mean, it was still a pretty full game, and in our section it was still 2-0. So, I mean, shout out to the fans. I mean, I don't think people were like losing their voice over this game, but the Gator Nation is still showing up regardless of the administration's effort to keep people from parking in the places they have for generations, and for the fact that the team just has historically been bad now for several seasons. We're still showing up because we love that logo. So fans, A freaking plus. You're going to get an A plus. I honestly feel like every game this season, the way that you guys have been showing up. The special teams. So I'm going to I guess we're going to do coaching. I'll do an overall at the end. Coaching. Yeah, we're going to have to cover the offensive line rotation in our preview show for Texas A&M. Austin Barber graded out for 2 games in a row now as the top PFF lineman in the game, and he got 24 snaps. Now, there was somebody, I think Napier said it after the game, they're trying to work in guys to give them some reps and experience on that line. Okay, fine. if that's the case, then A&M, you better have your starting 5 solidified.
And why is Barber the one who's covering reps at that?
Well, and
I mean, coming off of his reps.
Listen, I get the argument maybe that you don't want the guy to get hurt. He's your best offensive lineman, so you don't want him to get hurt. But here's the thing, Neil.
Then don't play Lagway against Samford because he could get hurt.
Well, he didn't have a choice. But the against A&M, we know more rotation. You better have your solid 5 and then 2 to 3 guys you rotate in and out as needed when a guy needs a blow. That's it. I mean, in my opinion, the starting 5 at this point should probably be going left to right: Barber, Najee Harris, Jake Slaughter, who's been playing also very well at the center spot. Right guard. This is a tough one. I guess you probably rotate either George or Waits, but you're not putting Waits at tackle. You're not putting him at tackle. The weak spot on the team.
Those are so unappealing. Both of those options are so unappealing.
Not great. Crenshaw Dixon played all right at right tackle. I think he earned the start against A&M there, but I also would love to see more of Caden Jones, the guy we recruited, the 4-star out of Texas. It'd be kind of cool to see that guy get a lot of play against Texas A&M at school that we actually beat them out to get him. So that's who I think it should be. But the coaching staff, in my opinion, I'm going to give them a C- because like you said, it's not great. Slightly, I always tend to grade a little bit higher than Neil does, but a C-, not great. You're going to have to coach a lot better next week if you're going to beat A&M. Defense, I'll give them B-, same as you. I think they performed well. They did get the turnover. I see more turnovers, man. I want us to get more takeaways. Like, that's going to be a key for me against A&M. Can we get more than one takeaway in this game? You know, can we win the turnover margin consistently for once? So that's where I'm struggling with the defense. Offense, I'll give him a B+. I mean, Lagway played stupendous. Obviously, the true freshman passing record nearly broke a school record. Overall, if you take away the fumble and the 4th and 1 where we didn't get that, I put that a lot more on the coaching staff than the team. Florida scores a lot more points in this game, and I probably would have graded them out a little bit higher, but they didn't, so that's why they get the B+. Overall grade, I'll go B-, slightly ahead of you. Oh, special team. I missed special teams. Special teams, I'll give them an A. I mean, I think they're playing great. They're playing great right now, and DK is a nice element to the return game for punts, and that's going to help an offense that has been struggling a little bit with field position. So if you give Lagway or Mertz short fields, it's going to help the offense in the long run. So I'll give them an A there. Overall, B-. So that's probably, I'll grade them out higher just because I'm giving special teams more. B- for me overall. Certainly, they did what they had to do. They played better in the second half. Would have liked to have seen more for them in the first half. They're going to have to play immensely better to beat Texas A&M next weekend at home.
I want to end the show by saying one last thing. To Graham Mertz, we both have basically called for you to lose your job. I know we said it in a sense that you didn't lose the job and DJ Lagway deserves to win it, but I just want to say you have my respect from here to the stars for what you've done for this program. It's not something that I say lightly, that I want you, after all you've done for this program, to cede your job to a true freshman. You've done everything in a first-class manner. You have done it with respect and grace and class, and I have all the appreciation in the world for what you've done, both physically and just mentally for this program. I mean, the brains that you have shown to control the football and limit turnovers, as well as handle every question and criticism and concern that's come your way with the grace and class that you have. All the respect in the world. I'm so grateful that this program is led by a guy of your caliber. It's absolutely nothing personal. It is strictly football. It is a football business decision. So I know that some of the clips on this show do tend to make the waves around the internet. So, I want that out there, that we respect you. We appreciate all you've done for the program. It is strictly because we think that Lagway has a higher ceiling, but we are both very appreciative of all you've done.
Well, I couldn't have said it better myself, Neil. And I think that is a good way to end the show, to end this recap of the Samford game. So for all of you that have been watching, please make sure you like down below, leave a comment on your reaction to this game, as well as If you think DJ Lagway or Graham Mertz should be starting this weekend, and if you're not already, hit that subscribe button down below. If you're listening on our audio platforms, please rate and review the show. It helps us bring Gator Nation so much great content. So from all of us here at the All Kinds Weather Forecasts, your host Chris Yanes, Neil Schulman, signing off from another episode